This is an Okuma cold water, low profile, line counter, level wind. It is the CW-354D. And I'm going to replace the drag washers and lube this fella up. So let's go over some of the tools I'm going to be using. Phillips head screwdriver. Don't use one of these big fatties. You'll strip something or break something, and I know that from experience. Phillips head. Use a little flathead. You don't even need to load this into the handle. I'll show you where that's used. Crescent wrench. Needle nose tweezers. These will come in handy. You don't need them, but they are super useful. Some blue thread locker. Don't use red. Reel grease. Reel oil. You don't really need to worry about the brand you're using as long as it's made for fishing reels. And here are the drag washers that I'm going to install. These are from Smooth Drag. I've used Dragmaster also. It's pretty much the same stuff. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is disassemble the handle here. We have this retaining screw here that I just pulled out. And once you've removed that, you can loosen the nut here. And the retaining washer that goes with the retaining screw to hold the nut in position. Remove the handle. And there's a little round washer here. A round keyed washer. And let's take off our drag knob. That comes right off. You'll have this little round washer that comes off. Now, some other videos you might watch where you're taking these apart, they try to take the whole thing off together and keep it that way. But what happens if you mess that up? So I like to take it apart this way. So you'll see that there are these pieces right here. These are keyed, flexed, or bent washers. They're basically like this, and they're supposed to go this way so that they flex. This is the clicker mechanism for your drag knob, brake knob, and then there's this tiny little washer right here. Once you're done with that, you can take your little flathead and stick it right here. This is the quick release. And it's basically just there to keep this piece on the side in position. So use your finger to loosen that. Once it's spring loaded over here, so it'll just pop out. Once it's popped out, you can click this up this way. So, and then that comes off with the spool. There's the spool. And let's do a little bit of degreasing here. And a bit of degreasing here as well. And we will re-grease that here in a bit. I'm going to set that over here. Okay. So let's start taking screws out of here. And I like to think about this in terms of 3 sets of screws. So you have the case screws here and here. You have the line counter screws here and here and here. And then you have the spool chamber screws right here. So what we're going to do first is take apart the line counter. And you need to take apart the line counter on the right-hand model because there's a rod sticking out, a geared rod sticking out here that's underneath the main gear that you're going to have trouble disassembling it without just taking this thing off. And it might be kind of sketchy taking it off the first time, but once you get used to it, it's not that big of a deal. It's pretty easy to realign. And it'll be hard for me to show you this while I'm putting it back together. So I'm going to show you where this one component is. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So next thing I want to do is take apart these two. And so these screws are different sizes. This one and this one are different sizes. So you do not want to mix these up. I was lucky when I mixed it up, I put the small one in the big one, and so I didn't damage anything. But if you try to force that big one in the small one, you're going to wreck this reel. So the way I do that is the way I'm holding this. This is the inside one, this is the outside one, relative to my hand. So just put it over here. That's outside, away from you. This is inside, near you. Next thing I want to do, take apart this case. And these case screws are also different sizes. So this is the inside of the reel, so we'll call this the inside screw. And I'll put this closer to me for inside. And then over here, we have the other one right here. Just trying to use my hand to hold this together so that the gears don't just fall apart inside. So that's the outside. It's the outside of the reel case. So, okay. So you want to hold this way. You kind of want to just finagle this. And it takes a little bit. There we go. And this thing pops right off. And it slides right off there. Looks like we're hung up there a little bit. Okay, so let me show you this. Right there is a saddle. This thing basically sits right in that saddle, if you can see that when you're putting it back together. I'm not going to be able to show you that when I put it back together because I have to hold it down in order for these to not fall out of place once I'm done. So I set my line counter over there. I set this piece over here. So we need to remove that bearing so we can oil it here in a second, but let's get this sorted first. And you see that the eared gear or the eared washer has already come out of its spot. So we're just going to take this entire thing, set it aside, take this thing as well, set it aside. And you'll see that right there, this little gear. You can pull this out like that. Set that aside. Set that aside. Just keep in mind there's these two little springs that go over these posts after you've put this thing on with its U shape towards the main gear, towards the center post. So let's come in here and just kind of pat stuff. Okay, all right, and then we're gonna set this aside. And I got this little cushion over here so I can set it without it falling over, and that'll come in handy later on when we're trying to put things back together. So let's come over here And so you don't really need to take this out. In fact, I recommend you don't. Get your cloth or whatever it is that you're using to clean up. Get in there, clean that stuff out. And then maybe get some of that stuff out of there too. That's for the tensioner knob. All right, let's set this aside and let's look here at this thing. That's the sleeve that goes inside there. We'll want to oil those later. First things first. Sort these out the way they're in here. Okay, clean that. Here are the drag washers that it comes with. And I've taken this thing apart and put it back together multiple times to get this right, to show you what's happening here. But I wanted to point some things out here for you. Let me get these all lined up kind of somehow. Okay. All right. So first of all, notice that these are like kind of oily. They're really flimsy. Yeah. So we want to swap these out. So here are the washers. So you want to replace this garbage piece of plastic with an actual brake washer or drag washer. And then here you have this goes there and this goes there. So what you're going to notice when you order these drags initially is that they send you 3 of these. They don't send you one of these. And the reason for that is because the schematic online calls for 3 of these size washers, drag washers. I had to reach out to Smooth Drag and gave her some measurements, essentially the same measurements that I have for the one I pulled out. And she sent me one. These are nice and they're stiff. They're good quality, just as good as anything from Dragmaster that I've ever bought. And I'll show you why you need that, why one of these will not work. And I'll use one of the old ones as an example. So, first off, let's make sure that your stuff is all wiped clean and that you're not throwing things around. So you'll see there's a little bit of a friction scoring on this, and so that tells you which way it goes. So bring your reel over, slide that over the keying. It's keyed down there. And then this slides right on top of that. Make sure you don't get like dust or dog hair like I am here. Set that over here so it doesn't fall over. Wipe down your main gear. Throw that on top. Now, we're not quite ready to put the rest of the stuff on here because we need to deal with these. So let's get all the grease and stuff off here that you can. It's not that big a deal. You don't have to be perfectly clean. It's grease. It's going to stay greasy. It's just you want to make sure it's got fresh grease on there. So get some of that old stuff. That means you have more room for new stuff. Okay. So this drops down in there. And it has to drop down at the same time you're putting this on. So clean this thing up. And so essentially, before you put that on, you're going to want to set this here. See, it's not going to go on there. You have to kind of like put the, what do you call it, the gripper, the slotted side down. So yeah, the slotted side down. So make sure that this is going there and it's pointing directly at the main post. If you got it reversed like this, it's going to point that way. So that's wrong. It needs to go this way. So hold it there, slide it on top like that, and then put it in the hole like that. Then you can take your springs and slide those over those posts. Once that's done, then you can take your main gear, slot it over there. And since I'm doing this right now, I'm going to go ahead and grease this thing because I don't want to do it while I have the drags. So if you just do 4 points of grease, try to keep it off the top surface because you don't want that grease to migrate into your brakes. Then shift it around, put some more. And whatever you put on here is going to end up on that smaller gear. So don't sweat getting it directly on the gear, the smaller gear. So once it starts going, you'll see. It'll get on that gear just fine. Anyway. So now, make sure your fingers are not greasy and start putting the washers in position. That one goes first. Then you got the steel keyed washer, slots over the center post. Doesn't matter which way you put that one in. It's pretty much identical. Another thin one. And here's this eared washer that you want to put right here. And this is where I'm getting to the point where you need this, which doesn't come stock with the set, and it's not specified in the schematic. So if you just had one of these here, there's nothing that's going to hold that in place. And of course, but you look at that and you might think like I did that, well, this is got a dimple here and that'll press down in the middle. But that's not the way this is supposed to be installed. So it's just a bug, so to speak. In the schematic, you need a drag washer that will ride up against that post so it doesn't shift around. And once that's in place, then you put this in dimple up. There you are. So just for being thorough, I am going to go ahead and put a dab of grease right in there. Okay. All right. Now the fun part, putting this thing back together. Well, before we put this together, set this right here so it doesn't fall over. Let's go ahead and put some oil on the center bearing. So just drop a little bit of oil on one side and then the other. Wipe off that sleeve and then don't do anything yet, but you want to drop this thing down on the post. So if you look at this carefully, you'll see that it's got keying at the top, but not the bottom. You want the keying to stay at the top from this perspective. Okay, let's go ahead and put a little bit of oil on either side of the center post too, for this to hold on to. There we go. Okie dokie. All right. Now we can reassemble this, and we want to drop this on the top without this getting out misaligned at the same time that we put this in there. This is the part that takes some practice, and I wouldn't be surprised if I mess it up on this video as well. So let's see here. We want to got a bunch of, hold on a second. Yeah, make sure that you're working with is clean. So this has some, this is Loctite. I'm just gonna get that out of there. I don't want that migrating around inside the reel next season. Okay. So now we got this. Make sure that your eared washer, the key thing is that eared washer doesn't get misaligned. You'll have to take it apart again if you misalign that. So kind of stiffly put this in that hole right there, slot. And guide the center post through. That should do pretty smoothly now that you've oiled things up. Okay. So this is where I was talking about when I was disassembling. I cannot show you that saddle from here. I just want to double check. Yep, still aligned. Haven't messed it up. You gotta get this thing in such a way that it, I need to bring it down a little bit more. So you don't need that much space. But you gotta make it so that it can get under that main gear. It slides right in there. And everything kind of comes together. But you want to make sure that's there. Okay. So now you gotta kind of hold this in place while you tighten this. And you gotta check that it's functioning as expected at every step. Otherwise, you'll brick your reel and have to take it apart and figure out what you did wrong. All right, so that's enough to hold that in place. So holding this, I'm going to look in here. It's spinning, so I think we're good. We're aligned. So you see it's, so that sleeve right there, that's what the brake presses on in order to engage the drag. So if it's kind of coming out, you might find that it's not spinning at all, but if you just take your fingernails to press in, it'll spin. It'll engage the drag and spin. So let's resecure this housing. So this is the outside of the reel, so we take our outside screw. Oop. And get that in there. Again, hand tighten. Hand tighten. And then over here, the inside screw. And hand tighten. All right. Let's put that one in there. This one's kind of a pain in the butt to get in. Magnetic. guess I was able to get it in the first try. Would you believe that? It's luck, not skill. Out of skill means you're going to get that in every time. And be careful with that one. That one's, imagine that one's probably pretty easy to strip. All right, so for these two here, you're going to want to put some Loctite. And what I just do is squirt a little bit right here. You don't need much. You have to remember our convention, inside, outside. This is the inside one, so let's grab it, get some Loctite on it, drop it on there. This is the outside one. Let's get some Loctite on there, put it in there. I cannot stress how important it is that you do not over torque these screws. Let Loctite do the trick here. It also gives you a little bit more resistance to water penetration in the main housing. Well, this is not sealed, so I don't actually think it does a damn bit of good on that point. But whatever, it is what it is. Okay. Next thing we want to do, let's put some grease here on this guy. Just stick some right here. And maybe just a little bit along that line. And then this will drop right in there. And then you can add some grease here as well. Again, a little bit goes a long way. Put it there as well. And you'll see that this has a little space right here that allows you to slide that in at an angle. So that's where you know that it goes in this way, not that way. It goes in this way. So slides right on like that, snaps down like that. And then you want to engage your quick release. Okie dokie. And then again with this, hand tighten it. Boom. That's enough. Let's see how it works. Looks like our here. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Next. Feels pretty good. Next, we want to put this smaller washer down. You're going to want to oil this as you're putting these on. Enough. Drop the clicker on next. And then you want to get these boys on. So again, this one, the edges need to be bent upwards. And then the second one, the edges need to be bent downwards. So it's kind of like that clamshell shape. I don't know if you can see that here. And then you'll see that the other washer is right here, sitting on top there. I'm just going to throw it on together with the hung up there. And okay, so let's squirt that down there. Scoop that down there. And then you want to be careful you don't mess up the threading here. You want to get it on perfectly and spin it on there. Okay. Once it starts clicking, you know it's set. Then this keyed washer goes here on the knob, followed by, well, here, let's clean this up a bit. Okay. I could put that there. And again, when you're putting the nut on, be careful. Yeah. No, just because I'm filming. All right, then you want to crank this thing down a little bit more than you would any other part in this reel, but not much more. You see that lines up perfectly. Now I can get whatever is left of my thread locker, maybe a little bit more. There we go. Well, it's not a how-to if you don't have a screw flying off some point or twice. Come on. Come on. All right, there's the click. If you're not sure if your threads are lined up, sometimes it's a good idea to like back it off until it clicks. Thinking that this is maybe getting in the way. Yeah, I was putting a little bit too much side shear on the screw for it to get in there. There you go.